Anthropologists need to ask themselves a question. Is this a subject which is about helping people to understand each other? Or is it just about anthropologists helping to understand other anthropologists? Or worse still, is an anthropologist trying to get jobs by appearing to be clever by trying to write things that not even other anthropologists can understand? Now, it seems to me that we claim when we're going into the field and we actually use up people's time, which we do, that we are going to be contributing to a really important project by which people's understanding of other societies is actually enhanced. And I remember when I first started actually training in archaeology, I was horrified because I had these people and they loved digging up sites, but they hated writing up and publishing. And you thought, they've just destroyed the site. What was the point of that? Now, it's not quite as bad doing field work and not actually kind of letting people know about the results of that field work. But there's an element of that. I mean, why did you do it? And I don't think it's as crude as why should they pay for it. I think the real answer is that most of us come into anthropology with at least some kind of welfare intention. That we want the work we do to genuinely enhance people's lives, and essentially through education. Through education, making them, as it were, less ignorant, more knowledgeable, and in this case, more understanding about other societies. And unless you actually reach out to people, unless you have a medium to do that, that's simply not going to happen. The premise of anthropology becomes untrue. I think the problem I had was that the training we got in university was precisely on how to become an unpopular anthropologist. The idea of orientation to particularly obscure kind of theorists and esoteric questions meant that you were, in a sense, trained up to actually write in a language that would fail to convey what I now appreciate is essentially the key contribution we have to make, which is the original insights we have about other societies. So becoming, as it were, a popular in the sense of wanting your material to go out to popular audiences was really a process of unlearning the training I originally had, which kind of took decades, because most of my earlier writing is writing that I think was obscure. Now, I don't think it means that I have become in any way less academically ambitious or theoretical. I just think that all of these concepts can be explained to people, and people have a great capacity for understanding difficult concepts if you, as it were, take the effort to try and explain them clearly. So the key shift has not been actually a shift in medium. I was writing books then, I'm writing books now. It was simply trying to develop a style that was relatively clear, that essentially avoided obfuscation, and increasingly used a language that people outside of anthropology could recognise, and was colloquial. And it is that that allows books to actually be read by a much wider audience. But I think that there is a suspicion that that means you've kind of become more shallow or less insightful, and I would certainly refute that. I think that actually in some ways you have to demonstrate greater insight when actually everybody out there can understand what you're talking about, and it would be pretty easy to challenge. It's actually the people who hide, I think, behind difficult or apparently difficult concepts, sometimes because actually they don't have much insight to actually convey, and this is not evident to people because they don't know what the hell those people are talking about. I don't think I chose a medium. I think that basically I'm in a career structure which said that writing books was the way to go, and that essentially has been the main medium, although I write journal articles. But in many ways I'm very glad that it was books. And there's a very simple reason for that, that I think there is a direct affinity between book writing and the discipline of anthropology, simply because I think anthropology retains that kind of holistic ambition of context. That is to say, what we are trying to suggest is to understand any particular aspect of that society. The more you know about that society in general, the more you can comprehend why they would think this or why they would do that, and that in turn allows you to understand other aspects of that society. Now, a journal article actually cannot really encompass that breadth of knowledge and the breadth of insights that you have gained from doing 15 months ethnography. So for me, I find it very hard to actually be true to what I understand the discipline trying to convey with anything much shorter than a book. So I'm very happy seeing the book, the monograph if you like, as the sort of core to the way anthropology presents itself to the world, because it has the scale that allows you to fulfill that ambition of some kind of holistic endeavour which provides, each element provides the context for the other elements of what you're trying to explain. Yeah, obviously, since our current project is the study of social media, I also use social media, but I realised after a while I wasn't necessarily comfortable using social media completely in a public framework, because in a sense, to actually be an ordinary person participating in social media in an ordinary way, Facebook is not really designed as a public broadcast medium. I couldn't be quite as silly and use some of the words that I naturally use if it was actually going out into the public domain. So I'm quite happy with a Facebook that I think is fairly similar to the Facebooks that most people use, in which I actually know all the people who are on my Facebook and I won't actually share it with anybody I don't know for that reason. Whereas I've taken something like Twitter as essentially a public broadcast medium. That is to say, it's an update of what is going on in our work. It's telling people about things as they get published. It's actually little insights as they occur to you, as it were, during the course of the day. It's letting people know about other things that are going on. It's an informational kind and a useful tool. And its great advantage, of course, is its immediacy, because especially if you concentrate on books, which can take a year or two to come out, we found that that is very important. But that's just my personal use of social media. The project that we're engaged in now, which has been called the Global Social Media Impact Study, but will be finally published as Why We Post, has completely transformed my idea of using a variety of media in order to get popular dissemination of anthropology. For one thing, we as a team decided to blog from very early on, and that blog has been quite well followed. I mean, one of the posts actually about the decline of Facebook amongst youth went viral, so it really went sort of global. But all the blog posts, I think, are seen, and it's helped build momentum around the sort of interim ideas that we have about the likely outcomes and likely insights from the project, and that's been useful in its own right. Second point was that when I visited all the individual field sites of the team, I was frustrated because even though the team is brilliant, they write fantastically informed, good information about their sites, I recognised that visiting the sites gave me a sense that I just couldn't get from writing. And that meant that when it came to the sort of dissemination, when it comes to the potential of other media, and how you can use those to disseminate anthropology to popular audiences, I think what we're really learning from is the current project. Project developed around the title the Global Social Media Impact Study. Eventually it'll be published as Why We Post. And one of the first things, Tom MacDonald, who was one of the team, suggested really starting a blog very, very early on. And we did that, and we're very pleased we did. I mean, the blog has been very regular. It seems to have a good following. It's now been going for 2 years. One of the posts that I did on Facebook, No Longer Be Used by Youth, kind of went global. It was all over the place. And it does definitely allow you to say interim things about a project that is actually going on for several years. The other thing that I really learnt while doing the project was that after about halfway through the field work, I had the position to visit all the team in the field. Now, what I learned from that was that this is a brilliant team. You know, the writing is fantastic, the highest quality you could possibly hope for. And yet, notwithstanding that, when I actually visited them in each of these, in Turkey or in Chile or wherever it was clear that I learnt a lot that would help me understand what they were saying that you just couldn't convey by text alone. And so what that made me realise is if people are going to be able to engage with this kind of anthropological work, they need another medium. And we therefore decided that everybody in the project would make a minimum of 10 short films, both about the place and how they did the work, but also just little sort of instances of the things they were studying. And that then would be part of the dissemination. And that we also realised that the more kind of, like, theoretical or difficult the concept you wanted to get across, the more important again it was to have maybe interesting visualizations. So now we're looking a lot more at things like infographics, we're looking at animations or cartoons, which are very expensive, so I'm not sure how many of those we can afford. But then I think there's a final element to this, which is really thinking about the integration between all these various elements, because I think to reach a big audience, which is what we really would like to do, you've got to actually have, in a sense, a holistic plan where all things fit together. So, for example, we're saying that everything is being written is going to be read by a non-anthropologist to check that the language is actually clear outside of anthropology, and if they say not clear what's going on, it has to be rewritten. Then there's actually the fitting together of the films, the animations, the insights into an overarching site that it can be easily accessible on computers, on tablets, on smartphones, etc. So you really have to think through the whole strategy of dissemination. Now we've got a long way to go. We actually are hoping that all of this will be ready for launching in January 2016. So we've actually got more than a year, but it's going to take more than a year to actually create the kind of quality and sort of seamless integration between the various elements of this to actually have the programme up and running and hopefully reach a genuinely popular audience. But the final category, which I think is maybe certainly one of the most important, is anthropologists work in all these different countries, and then we often reduce ourselves to publishing in English, which means the only people who can read it are the people who actually understand English. And there is something about again, that sort of welfare foundation of anthropology that suggests that where we can, where we have the resources, we want to try and go beyond that. So the commitment is that at least the upper level of what we're trying to do, and we may not be able to afford to do it with all the books, but at least the sort of more popular elements of this dissemination programme, we want everything to be free, we want it to be all open access, but we also would like it to be in all the languages of the countries in which we worked. Clearly the programme that I was describing earlier requires a huge amount of resources, and I think we are lucky to have the opportunity to maybe do something that is different and can speak to anthropology being a genuinely kind of comparative discipline working in these 8 countries at once. And also I recognise we have the advantage of working on social media. I mean, the topic of social media is one that lends itself to popular dissemination because frankly everybody's really interested in social media. It's changed their engagement with the world. I think it's a very good medium for making anthropology popular. Having said that, what then is possible if you're a PhD student without much by way of resources, working on a topic that is not social media but something actually very much more specific that will be of maybe more limited interest? I still think it is important that you can consider what are the routes by which, if you have insights, if you think that the work you did actually led you to understand things that previously you didn't, then clearly you want other people to be able to share those insights. And even one of the little factors that I said about the work that we were doing for our current project is something that is clearly available to anybody. That is to say, to create language which you test out on non-anthropologists. You ask somebody who's majoring in English or in physics or something else and said, just read this. Is there anything that isn't clear to you? Because if you don't do that, you're really putting something out there which is very difficult for you as an anthropologist to appreciate what it is that we now take for granted in anthropology, and that's become really something that just circulates around our own discipline. So it's incredibly familiar. We think that everybody knows this word, but they just don't. So I think one thing I would say is, it's not so much do you put it on a blog, do you put it in a film, do you put it in a book, do you put it somewhere else. It's that the language has to be something that doesn't put people off or exclude them. And anybody around you who is an anthropologist can tell you without too much time and effort whether they understand, can follow what it is that you're trying to say. And I guess my core advice would be to anybody, just do that. Make sure before you put it out in a popular medium that it is something that pretty much anybody can understand and appreciate, and they have got the point. They understand what it was you were trying to convey. They can say it back to you. Oh, so that's what you're trying to say. When you hear that, okay, we can put it out there. We are going to get our point across. Anybody can help with